Good Life on 938 Live.
Back on The Good Life with me, Daphne Lim, here on 938 Live. I'm talking to Flamain. She is the captain of the Sunreef 62 as managed by BlueStarYachting.net. I have some photos on my Facebook page if you'd like to go and have a look. We went out on the Sunreef 62 earlier this week and I caught some amateur photos. They're not very good, sorry. If you do want to see better photos, you can go to BlueStarYachting.net. Of course, they've got professional photos there. My Facebook page is facebook.com/Daphne Lim. And welcome back, Celine. Now let's find out about navigating the waters around Singapore, because this can't be an easy task. I'm not sure if you've ever experienced so many tankers in your life, in your path.
It is very full on. The waters in Singapore are actually the busiest in the world. I think it's probably still the largest or second largest container shipping port in the world. And so that reflects very clearly on how much traffic we see on the water, whether it's large ships, cargo tankers, pilot boats, even fishing vessels, fast ferries. It's a very full-on job. When you're on watch on the bridge and you have to ensure that you don't breach the kind of what we call the rules of the road in captain's jargon, it's actually quite draining because you have to watch even what's coming behind you.
Indeed. And during these trips, these day trips that last from 3 to 5 hours, are you always moving?
We are moving for most of it. Usually on a 5-hour trip, what we would do typically is spend a couple of hours going down to Lazarus or St. John's Islands because it's quite beautiful down there. We anchor so that the guests can have a barbecue, and then we come back more often than not in the hours of darkness. So there's the combination of the difficulty of having this very happening traffic situation with not such good light conditions and a lot of background lighting on shore because of everything that's happening in the city and in Jurong Island and everything, and it's actually quite demanding conditions of navigation.
Goodness, that sounds so challenging, especially for you you're basically in charge of the boat.
I am in charge of the boat. I am responsible for the safety of the guests and the crew and the boat, and so this is a responsibility that you can't step away from.
And I mean, what does that take? Like you mentioned the rules of the road in captain's jargon. What is it?
Well, similarly to the way you have a highway code for driving a car, you actually have an equivalent that's called Rules for Prevention of Collisions at Sea, and that will define exactly what conduct you need to have in case you identify a risk of collision with another vessel.
Does that mean all the smaller boats basically have to navigate around bigger boats?
Actually, in real life, that's what it ends up being. That's not what the rules say. The rules define, for instance, if you have someone coming from your right-hand side on the boat, you're supposed to turn right and go behind them, for instance. In real life, when you see a big tanker coming from your right-hand side, they're much slower to maneuver than you are. You're more nimble, so you try to give way, even if you know that by the rules you don't have to. It's just a matter of courtesy and good seamanship.
So big ships and tankers, those are a few obstacles. What about our waters? Are they choppy compared to other areas?
The waters of the Port of Singapore itself are reasonably calm, apart from the wakes that are created by all the fast ferries. This is the main issue we have sometimes on charters, is like they tend to come quite close to pleasure yachts, and their wakes are quite large, in excess of 1 meter, so it does get quite choppy, and we also get guests that get a little bit wet on the nets on the forward part of the yacht, but that's the main issue that we have in terms of weather. Unless we get a really bad storm, in which case we wouldn't be going out anyway, we would postpone a little bit. The waters in the Port of Singapore are relatively protected.
Right, and I mean, just in case it gets a little bit choppy out there, I've got quite a few friends who, as much as they love being out on the water, get very bad seasickness. And, they've got to do the patches, they've got to look into the horizon. How do you prevent all of this so that your guests are actually enjoying themselves rather than being concerned that they should try and curb their seasickness?
There's a lot of things that we can do. Typically, seasickness is something I will address in my safety briefing with the guests at the beginning of each cruise, and giving them some advice that for most of them will sound completely counterintuitive. For instance, telling them to keep a full stomach. Most people would think that they will not be physically sick, if they do not eat. It's actually worse. If you board a yacht on an empty stomach, you are much more likely to feel queasy and unwell than if you board with a full stomach, full of food, not drinks. And some of our guests also make that mistake of, drinking a little bit of Coke or, a little bit of wine and thinking that's going to be all right. Alcohol consumption on board does make seasickness a lot worse as well.
But that's the whole point.
That's only after you've had food. You can do that,
Right.
but make sure your stomach's well lined up beforehand.
But you don't go all the way out and become really, really full before you go on board, though, if you're prone to seasickness.
It's probably preferable to eat a good meal an hour or two before boarding the yacht. We also recommend some particular types of medications to our guests. Some seasickness pills are actually very good. I mean, 10 or 15 years ago, they used to be very drowsy, make you feel very tired, and you would just fall asleep in a heap in a corner. These days, those pills have made a lot of progress. They're completely non-drowsy. You feel completely normal, and they work amazingly well. What doesn't work so well is everything that's pressure points, these little wristbands that you see sold in health shops sometimes. That doesn't work so well. Anything ginger-based, natural herbal remedies based on ginger are amazingly effective, such as ginger tea as well. If you just boil water, put sliced ginger in there, that's perfect as well.
Awesome.
And of course, essential oils like peppermint, lavender, all these sort of essential oils mixed together. We actually have little sticks that we give our guests to sniff when they're on board, and that also does a lot to alleviate the symptoms of seasickness. But the key thing is keep a full stomach.
So if somebody has not listened to any of your advice and gone on board on an empty stomach and they are heaving overboard because they have not heeded your advice, can they be saved during, they're obviously having a bad time within the first hour. Can they be saved during the rest of the trip?
They can be saved, yes. There's one trick that works amazingly well is even if you've started being very badly seasick and being physically sick, lying down with your eyes closed will sort you out. Even if you don't sleep, just to close your eyes, because seasickness is basically your eyes disagreeing with your inner ear. All these little bones that you have inside your inner ears that are responsible for your balance. Nobody really understands why your body reacts in such way when what you see doesn't match what your ears experience. But so cutting one of these sources of stimulation actually works. So you can't cut the movement because you're on the boat. So if you just close your eyes, then you stop the disagreement that happens between your ears and your eyes at your brain level, and that sorts most people out.
Would it be better to be in the cabin or outside on the board?
Unfortunately, this is Singapore. The weather is quite nice, warm and hot, so a lot of people enjoy staying inside in the air conditioning, and this is unfortunately the place where they are most likely to get sick. The best place to be is upstairs on the flybridge where I'm actually driving the boat, because you can get plenty of fresh air, as you were saying earlier. Keep your eyes on the horizon. That makes a lot of difference.
Very good advice. Stay close to the captain. That's probably the safest spot on the boat anyway. Talking to Celine Flamain, she is the captain of the Sunreef 62 as managed by Blue Star Yachting. We'll be back on The Good Life in just a moment.
Living it up on 938 Live.